Good morning, everyone. This is the
Tom, if you want microphone.
excuse me. Good morning. This is the July 13th, 2021 meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. I will call the meeting to order. Let's see from the Zoom screen and the folks in the room here that we do have a quorum. So I would start with the approval of the minutes from June 22nd. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions or discussion or revisions? Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say no. Minutes are accepted. Approved. Do we have any public comments today?
No.
Okay,
None.
we have no public comments. We do not have a public hearing. And so we have a pretty short agenda, which is unusual for us. Let's start with staff reports. Zoning Administrator Planner. Mr. Miller is going to lead us through that.
Thank you. Good morning. As you know, Bob Colson, our zoning administrator, resigned effective June 25. We have been exploring our options since then for replacing Mr. Colson. One option, of course, that is out there is the idea of contracting out zoning services to a consulting firm, wherein there would be somebody on staff to take in a request, but any zoning related questions, interpretation, and then administration in terms of inspections and issuance of permits would be directed to a consulting firm. I reached out to and spoke with representatives from 3 firms to find out if that is in fact a viable option that the county may wish to consider primarily for fiscal reasons. What I found was most of them, I think at least 2 of them, felt that they could do it, but it really wasn't something they have done in the past. They have zoning administrator employees with that kind of experience on their in their roster. What they don't have is people who live in our area in Menominee, Dunn County, Eau Claire. So the work could be done mostly remotely in terms of interpretation and review, but inspections need to be done in person, on-site inspections. It would be a situation where somebody from their office would need to go out. We would pay mileage along with the hourly rates for that. We could craft a fee schedule to recapture the majority or all of our costs for a consultant. But in terms of practicality, it would be more difficult to administer. I think the wait times would potentially be longer. And the service, because they would not be on staff and available during normal office hours for property owners in Dunn County, would not be the level that it has been. But it is an option that the PR&D committee may wish to discuss. The other obvious option is hiring somebody to replace Mr. Colson, hiring a new zoning administrator, county planner. And what I'm looking for from the committee today is not a vote, I'm not looking for a motion, but I want your feedback, see if there's a consensus on which of these 2 options we should pursue. Perhaps after that conversation, Mr. Chair, I could finish up with some other discussions about things going on with the zoning division unrelated to the zoning administrator directly.
Yeah, let's do that. We've had some of this discussion before, but let's open it up again for further review. Any comments?
Yeah, I guess I left our last meeting thinking that we had suggested that we were mostly favorable to the idea of hiring, to the extent that it was possible, hiring a replacement for Bob. I mean, I thought that was sort of consensus.
And it may be, but in the light of continuing discussions or continuing investigations on the options, I wanted the committee to evaluate it again with the new information.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, hiring a consulting firm out of the area doesn't seem very feasible to me.
Anybody else?
Supervisor Bjork,
Yes, Gary.
I totally agree with like Diane that it doesn't make sense to go outside the area. And it's kind of nice to have somebody that's in the office every day and maybe have a little more like history with the county, with the people, with the surveyors and the realtors. It just makes more sense. And like you said, you know, if we're going to do everything outside the county and not have any employees, the way it sounds, I think that is very foolish. I think Diane was totally right that we should go forward. And I agree with her that that was our consensus at the last meeting. And I would hoped that we would have already started the process of like, you know, trying to find a replacement. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr.
I
Miller.
should have put a little bit more context into the discussion. One of the things that I think this committee members want to consider is the broader financial situation of the county. There is a model using a consultant instead of hiring, and a fee schedule designed to recapture those costs that would reduce the levy use by the E&S department. I'm not advocating for that, but when we decide as a government to fill this position with a county employee, to hire somebody to be the zoning administrator and county planner, we're cutting off the possibility of eliminating that use of levy and we're cutting off the possibility of a model in which the costs for zoning administration are borne by the specific property owners who seek a zoning permit, whatever that may be, a zone change, shoreland permit, setbacks for construction, etc. We cut that off. And I'm not saying that we could craft a fee schedule that would recover 100% of our costs. It's not the case. There are many simple inquiries, some of which could be handled by the intake person at E&S because of their familiarity with zoning, but many of which are interpreted and would require interpretations by an expert, but there's no fee associated with getting that interpretation. So there would be there wouldn't be 100% recapture in that case. Again, I'm not advocating for that, using a consultant and a fee schedule to recover the majority of those costs, but we should have our deliberation. I encourage supervisors, members of the PR&D committee, to take the broader look at the county's overall financial situation and make a give mindful direction back to staff as to whether to hire somebody permanently on staff as the zoning administrator.
I'm
Mr.
just curious.
Chairman?
1 second, please, Gary.
Yep.
Why does hiring a staff preclude any consideration of raising fees to a more sustainable level?
It absolutely does not.
That's what you said, though.
Yeah, we can evaluate our fee schedule at any time.
Right.
But I think it is likely that if if any unit of local government contracts out its zoning authority to a consultant, the fee schedule being set up to recapture the majority of those costs, its levy costs are lower than if they have on staff, regardless of the fee schedule. But could we improve the county's bottom line by adjusting the fee schedule again? Yes, we could. And that is an option even if we hire on staff.
That was my question. So thank you for posing it.
Supervisor Bjork, do you have another question?
Nope, that was my exact question. So thank you for asking it.
I mean, I think, Mr. Miller, that the committee will be fully able to and willing to look at the reality of the budget process. And I think you're right that we probably haven't done, we've been a little slow to do that in the past, but you know, the reality is the reality, and we'll take a look at it. So anybody have any, my sense is that the committee is still pretty firm in its intention to have the county look to fill this position. Anyone on the committee have a different opinion than that, or is that accurate? Okay, so you want to go on then?
Sure, thank you for that feedback. So we will proceed to post that notice and attempt to fill that position as soon as possible. In the interim, I have been working with Cedar Corps. Bob Colson is now working there on getting from them a draft contract for Bob Colson's time as interim zoning administrator. And I hope to receive that contract today. The talking points were on average 12 hours a week. Think of it as 3 blocks of 4-hour times to address, again, zoning administration, interpretation requests, and to assist in taking through zoning actions, whether it's through the Board of Adjustments or zone changes that come through PR&D and the county board, et cetera. It would not involve, we don't anticipate site visits, the kind of travel that's entailed in checking setbacks, et cetera, or enforcing for violations of zoning and shoreline regulations. For that purpose, we have interviewed individuals to fill a limited term employment zoning inspector position. We interviewed 3 people and we'll be making the offer to 1 of those people. The idea is that that zoning inspector, hopefully we get them on board very quickly so that Michelle and, you know, before she goes on maternity leave, we'll be able to do some training. Janet, of course, will be in the office to assist in training that zoning inspector. If we can secure Bob Colson's time in the interim, he will also be involved in training that individual, whom we expect to stay in place at the very least during the time of Michelle's maternity leave, if not through the end of the year. One of the things that will be part of the budget fiscal year 22 from E&S will be a request to make that a permanent position, the zoning inspector position. So that is in process. The other element that is involved here is the idea of shifting sanitary permit or sanitary administration to the public health department from the environmental services. We've been in communication and had meetings with KT Gallagher, our director of public health, with Michelle, who is the septic inspector, to discuss how that would work and does it make sense. The primary motivation for doing that is that there are people in the public health department who either have the POUTS training or can acquire it. So we can potentially increase the number of people who are able to inspect and help administer septic permits. Those conversations also entailed Janet, whom under the proposal would remain with the E&S department and continue to take in permit applications and calls and direct them to Michelle or others in the public health department. Michelle's position would be shifted to public health. But the contact point for public would remain the E&S and Janet. She does part of the administration of septic permits and would continue to do so. She does part of the administration of zoning permits and would continue to do so. So her position and her duties would remain unchanged. Michelle, her position as sanitary inspector would shift to public health. Her zoning duties would disappear and be taken by the zoning inspector and the new zoning administrator. And there would be 22 in 2022 KT Gallagher would evaluate the effectiveness and the needs for the sanitary permit administration at the same time that the new zoning inspector is evaluating the needs for the zoning administration and planning functions, which would remain in that department. So a lot of balls in the air with respect to this division, a lot of interim kinds of steps that we have to take. We're not talking about pulling the trigger on the organizational shift of sanitary inspection to public health until the beginning of the year, but we will work through the logistics of it to try to make it as seamless as possible. So the budgets that you see from ENS and from public health will include that shift. And it's hoped, as I said, that I'll repeat, primary motivation for the shift of sanitary to public health is the potential for improving the amount of service rather than having one person plus a consulting firm, in this case Cedar Core, to do septic inspection. There's potential for it being 2 or 3 people in the public health department that are involved in septic permits and inspections.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
If I may.
Yeah.
Is it just me, but did it take us an extraordinarily long time to fill that LTE position?
No,
No?
no. We, Bob interviewed one person on the 25th, I think, of June. We interviewed the last ones when right after July 5th. So it's only been a couple of weeks.
Okay. Just me then.
And like I said, we have a candidate to whom we will extend the offer. I have been telling the candidates there is no guarantee that the position, zoning inspection, will be a thing come fiscal year 22. That's not my decision. That's this committee's recommendation, ultimately the county board's decision. But I do see operationally a need for the position. So.
Okay. Anything else anyone has, Mr. Miller? All right. You okay with the discussion, Paul?
Yes,
Got your-
I've got the direction I need. Like I say, we will advertise for the zoning administrator, county planner position, and I'll try to keep the committee up to date on the other parts.
Thanks. Moving on to Register of Deeds. No. Moving on to Register of Deeds monthly report. Any comments or questions? Okay. Environmental Survey Division.
Just a quick question of Tom Carlson, that is. I know that you get fewer and fewer requests now for people to help them out. That little chart you had there. Is that because you've got so many of the corners and everything remonumented?
Yes, that's a main factor in that, correct?
So we can look forward to getting back to the draft ordinance again.
Yes, yeah, yeah, let me just expand on that. Nick and I did spend some time on that before the 4th. And as we got into it, we just decided we need a little more time.
Yeah.
We hate to come back with it piecemeal. So Nick is very busy with things, and a couple hour block we had in there just wasn't enough to finish it. So yes, the plan is to come back on the 27th in 2 weeks.
All right. Any comments, questions for Tom? Land and water conservation.
This is the fun one. There's always so much going on. A lot
know.
of questions you can ask. It's just amazing looking at this one and the annual report with the things that you guys are doing. I have 3 questions of Chase, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
First off, you said you facilitated collection of stream nutrient samples. Those are usually with the volunteers. so forth. Have we got enough now, or is?
Yeah, that's correct. Basically, we've kind of resurrected our program. Red Cedar Basin Monitoring Group had done that for many, many years, and basically due to just turnover in that, the leadership in that structure, there was kind of a vacancy for a couple of years. Basically looking at trying to resurrect that. So we have Heather in our office. She's working with DNR, Chris Wilger, our surface water contact for streams, and looking at where we have data gaps within the county, not only on surface water, but also lake monitoring. And we're trying to plug those holes with more routine sampling, primarily through volunteers. We have, I believe, 3 or 4 volunteers right now that are taking on some stream sites, as well as Heather in our office has picked up a couple just to, again, fill the gaps and make sure that long-term trends, that we have some sort of data that's filling in those areas so we can do proper assessments and hopefully for prioritizing workload and that sort of thing.
Well, it sounds like you're even doing more than what they're doing before. You got a lot of balls, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not certain we're doing more, but we're
Okay.
making an effort. So
Then the next one down is Land and Water Conservation Division has developed standard operating procedures and guidelines for the implementation of cost share funds. So you've got guidelines you developed from scratch, or were there guidelines before? Or?
well, there wasn't anything formal before. I mean, there was a standard practices that I would say counties across the state, how DACAP advises us and has manuals to implement cost share funds for practices. We took those guidelines and tried to tailor them to our specific situation based on the number of staff that on those types of activities, and establish a better shared understanding amongst us internally how we're going to review, rank, and score applications, how we, what types of processes we need to follow in order to implement those cost share funds. A lot of it's administrative, making sure that we have proper documentation for audit purposes, especially it's grant dollars that are for cost share funds. We didn't really reinvent the wheel, but we, like I said, built I think a better, stronger shared understanding of what that program was about, and hopefully it gives better guidance or improved guidance for staff in the future.
How much flexibility do you have in handing out cost share?
Not a lot. I mean, the cost share money is for implementation of ag performance standards and prohibitions. So getting people into compliance within our 151. But the discretion comes in how, depending on the number of applications we have, the number of projects we have up in the air, making sure that we have solid practices and solid commitments from landowners before we allocate funds to them. I think in the past, we may have gotten into situations where we were working with a landowner and it sounded good, like this project would go forward. And due to contractor availability, weather, maybe some uncertainty by the landowner themselves, we would end up going into the end of the year with some funds on the table and not allocated to a particular project. And that snowballs into, well, now we need to spend those funds. We need to find a project for those funds. And it just creates a lot of unnecessary confusion and delay in getting the practices on the land. So now we're making sure that we have quality projects that are fully committed by landowners. We have a process in place that those get funded without putting us into a pickle at the end of the year.
Just one more in this section, if I may. The next paragraph down, you're in the process of developing a harvestable buffer program for the multi-discharge variants. What is
Sure.
that? I'm thinking of this. I'm learning here. All
Sure,
these questions
sure.
so I can learn what's going on.
So Mdv Multi-Discharger Variants, that is a program that's set up through Department of Natural Resources for municipalities that may need to reduce phosphorus output into discharge into surface water. So take a wastewater treatment facility, they're discharging X number of pounds of phosphorus to a water body. They may be in excess of what their permit allows them to. And upon permit renewal, they're either required to build brick and mortar infrastructure on that wastewater treatment plant to reduce that phosphorus, which can cost lots of money, or there's other programs out there to put those funds or a portion of funds into the watershed that can help reduce non-point source phosphorus pollution. One of those is multi-discharger variants. So basically those permittees apply for variants from their permit in order to offset their phosphorus reductions. We get, ours is about $2,600. So we're not talking about boatloads of money, but it is money that is available. This particular money that we're talking about is for within the Red Cedar River watershed. So the TMDL, looking at phosphorus reduction practices in that watershed. And what we've determined to be a reasonable and probably most successful practice would be to provide that money for harvestable buffers. Right now, we currently have the CREP program, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. That's going through a couple of changes right now where harvesting of hay off of those may be allowed going forward, but in the past it wasn't. And plus it's also a 15-year agreement, federal government program with pretty lucrative incentives behind it, but not a lot of people, I should say, several people aren't into signing up for a 15-year contract. Therefore, then we would lose out on those establishment of buffers in those critical areas. The other potential result would be where an individual is interested in establishing a buffer. We've worked with them to identify that area, but they don't qualify for CREP. This program would provide, we're proposing about $100 per acre incentive, and that would be for a 2-year agreement that we could get a buffer established, and it would be at a minimum width where they could get the width of their drill or the width of a hay bind to get in there and actually harvest that buffer, which will remove nutrients from the proximity of the surface water. From my past practice, we had a similar program that we developed in Pepin County for a number of years. It was very successful. Landowners signed up for that knowing that they could still receive some sort of income or some sort of production off of those acres. And in reality, it's really what we want to see, especially along some of our high phosphorus areas, is removing those nutrients, not only phosphorus either, but nitrogen and reduction of sediment, and get those nutrients out of that location next to surface water. So this is in initial stages. We're still trying to put that together, but formulate the details. But we had to submit a plan to DNR for those funds, and that is our intention to implement that. $2,600. We're looking at about 13 acres in the watershed. But depending, next year we may get more funds through Mdv. Some counties get a tremendous amount of funds because they have high discharge facilities in their watersheds, and they really need to ratchet down their phosphorus output. So this is going to ebb and flow, but at least we'll have a program in place that we can turn to when the opportunity is available.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for everybody's patience. This is all a learning experience every time. Always something new, Chase.
Good.
That's
What I'm here for.
I had one of the same questions. So.
Any other questions?
I do have one comment, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
introducing Jim Thompson.
Please do
I met
that.
him
Yeah, I
for
was
the
just
first
gonna
time
do
today
that,
as
yeah.
well, but we spoke on the phone. Jim is a Farm Service Agency representative, so by statute for the County Land Conservation Committee, a representative from the local Farm Service Agency Committee is required to be on the county's Land Conservation Committee, which currently on today's agenda, Land Conservation is present for a particular agenda item. So Jim will be formally appointed by county board at the July meeting. That's my understanding. And then anticipating when we have Land Conservation Committee agenda moving forward. So appreciate you being here today and look forward to what to come.
Really, really good news. Welcome, Jim.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Tom or Jim.
thank you. To follow up a little bit upon what Mike was saying, we're all in a learning process. I want to share with you, I think recognition of clubs and farmers that are doing a great job is important. And for years, sorry, I have hay fever. For years, I have been going to the LCD and asking for a recommendation so that the Chamber of Commerce could recognize a farmer or farm family rather for the outstanding job they're doing in working with the LWCD are doing a good job and soil health. And that way they get recognition for the good job done. And sometimes I think other farmers look to them and say, well, why were they recognized? And then we get a chance to share with them. So to you, Chase, thank you for helping with the name. And in the previous, it was Dan Prestabach. And every year the chamber would accept the recommendation that I came up with. And it was based on the work that was being done with all what you're doing. And I wish we would get more recognition on that work, recognizing the work that's being done. I share this only with you because I think sometimes we're doing a great job, but we don't tell it enough. The word doesn't get out enough. And like Mike, I'm learning here a great deal. And when I talk to people or organizations, they say, oh, really? Or why were they recognized? I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Jim. I do have one other question, follow-up question with regard to the report. I was really happy also to see the multi-discharger variants program being set up. So is this a new program?
So I think it started back in 2018.
Okay.
Earlier when the actual program was rolled out by DNR.
Right.
Our involvement here at the county, our department applied for, I believe 2018 or 19 was the first time that we received funds, and those were outside of the TMDL. That currently, some of those funds will be going towards a project on Elk Creek Lake, combination of merging of funds between Dunn County's funds and Eau Claire County's funds in a quite extensive project. The amount of money in that is very small as well, our contribution. And then last year, prior to my employment, we applied for these particular funds for the Red Cedar Basin. So it is relatively new in the last couple of years. I think what was unknown about the funds applied last year within the Red Cedar Basin was we didn't have a plan, or I'm not aware and staff weren't aware of a particular plan for those funds. So we had to develop one. So this is what we did.
So is this in some way a simplified or a more accessible way of doing the kind of what I forget what it was called, but the program where you more formally trading program?
Yeah, it's different than water quality trading.
Okay.
It's not as intense. This is a simplified version. This is simply a variance that those permittees are applying for a period of time, and they pay in by a certain rate based on their phosphorus reduction. Yeah. And then those funds get distributed to the municipalities that are affected by that watershed. So the funds that we got from, I believe, 3 or 4 different municipalities, and we got like a couple $100 here and there, they may also be paying into Barron County or paying into Chippewa County or others. So this is just our share of it, and every year DNR rolls out a list of here's your availability. And I'll be honest, sometimes the dollar amounts are quite low. It may not be worth our time, administrative time, to pursue them. But I think if we have a program like this set up that we can just turn it on when we have the funds available, that way the opportunity is there, and it hopefully doesn't cause too much administrative burden.
Right. I remember when we talked many years ago about the nutrient trading program, and at the time it was argued that the preferred practice for securing the credits was no-till. And so I'm really glad to see that you've been able to come up with a buffer program that works. That's really going to be valuable, I think, not just for this program, but going forward.
And I think we want to be careful that we didn't compete with CREP, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. I think there's tremendous value there in that program, long-term buffers. But this would be designed for those individuals that either didn't qualify for that program or for some reason we couldn't convince them to step into that realm. So have something available.
Great. Any other questions for Chase? All right, let's move on. Morgan. Let's see. I think when we get to the final report, we'll have some more things to look at. You made some, I thought made some really important comments in there. So, okay. Is there anything else, any other?
Mr. Chair, if I, there's one thing
Yeah.
I missed.
Yeah.
Just to recognize Janelle for her 41 years of
Oh,
service too.
yeah.
So I did have that at the end of my report,
Yeah,
but
you did.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yes,
I hope we can-
absolutely.
Hope she hangs on for a little longer.
We do. We definitely appreciate her work. Every meeting when I look at the packets and the minutes and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the monthly reports? Okay, then we're done with that. Let's move on to the annual report.
So this report, Mr. Chair, will be going to the county board here in a few weeks. So I guess you've all had a chance to go through it. If there's any questions, we can certainly entertain those. And then if the committee feels the report needs to be modified in any way, we can certainly make those changes before it goes in the county board packet.
I think you all
Any,
did a great job.
yeah, any particular areas people want to talk about? Diane, go ahead, say it again.
I just think that everybody did a really good job. It's a nice report. It's really informative. I appreciated it. Thank you all.
I agree. Very proud to be associated with you folks and have you presenting this to the board.
And again, this year it's going to be different. We're not giving verbal reports. It'll just be in the packet and the county board will be able to answer questions. Or ask questions. We will be there to answer any questions, but we will not be making a formal presentation.
Could you go to the last part of Morgan's report?
Got a question. Tom,
Yeah.
what township is number 20? The last.
Oh,
part.
2914, that would be the town of Stanton.
Okay.
Our goal for remonument,
Yeah.
yeah, we're working in that township. That's town of
All right.
Stanton right now.
So it's just-
Yeah, after I put that in there, I realized that it makes sense to me, but the average person, where's 2914? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of it sitting down here. I could have probably looked at the map that I have in my office.
It would, yeah, hindsight
it's
20, I
probably
should have
got
just
the
said,
township Numbers
sh-
on, but.
I should have just left the town and range out and just said the town of Stanton. That would have made more.
but I
Saving
thought of
time.
that when I read it, and I didn't think of looking over at the map. until I
Yeah.
got down
Actually,
here.
what I'll do is I'll change that. We have some time. I'll change that before it goes on into the packet. It might, yeah, answer some questions.
Do you know all of the townships by number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What are they?
Yeah, can you do it?
Give me a couple minutes.
I'm kidding.
2611 is Rock Creek, 2612 is Peru, 2613. Well, some of these are parts, Dunn and, Springbrook's part of several town and ranges, but yeah, I mean, I can go, they're just, you deal with them every day. They're in your head. It's like the alphabet. You don't forget.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, back to, Mr. Chair, you wanted to.
Well,
get
I
to a
just
certain
wanted to
section?
go to the sort of, I thought you did a really good job of talking about a really painful experience that we all went through and that you had to manage, unfortunately. So I want to compliment you on it. And then you had some thoughts that I hope the county board that you certainly finished up with. And I thought those were also very good. But I'm wondering if you have any comments you want to make to the committee about your experience with this.
Well, first of all, thank you for the relationship that we shared. I learned a lot working with you all and working with the division, working with the residents and the businesses and the farms of Dunn County. waste management anywhere is extremely challenging, as you guys all know. It's only gotten worse. We really saw with the global recycling crises, we really saw focused on all of those challenges that were occurring, and that hit us particularly hard with a program that's aged 30 years with infrastructure that is beyond its useful lifespan. So we had a lot of significant challenges we were unable to overcome because it would take, in order to continue the program and services that we provided so well to residents, it would require a lot of additional revenue and infrastructure. And we were just at the end of that road this year. So I think too that, you know, the municipalities have been engaged with the county in this program for 30 years. And I think a lot of them, it was just time for them to spread their wings and see if they could do it on their own. A lot of them had their own ideas about how they wanted to do that locally for their constituents. So, you know, I wish them well. I've been helping them all along here in this first half of the year. They've had a lot of challenges to overcome, been assisting them with that. I think most of their heads are in the right place, and they're certainly dealing with challenges, but they're hopefully going to overcome those great services that we provided to the county. So.
Okay. Yeah, I thought those were all good comments, Morgan. You know, really sort of brings to fore the idea that this is it's really is a larger public policy issue too. And the question about plastics in particular, when we look at the role that they're playing in our environment, it's not going to be solved by any one of us individually or even at a local level. It's going to take a major policy shift.
Yeah, the plastics are pervasive, and we all know that we all ate plastics in our breakfast this morning. Microplastics, it's in everything. It's in our groundwater, our surface water, our soils, our food. We need to create, you know, the ultimate lesson in commodities is to create cyclic economies for everything you make. And the disconnect is that when people have these bright ideas for products, they don't necessarily involve the people that deal with the end of life component of those products at the beginning of the conversation. It comes at the end, and then there's this oh crap moment. It's not really recyclable, and we're going to end up with all this waste at the end of the year.
So none of those costs are actually factored into the reality of the development of the product or the manufacturing of it.
That's changed somewhat, but it's a slow grind, you know, getting there. But now with all of there's a new focus on sustainability and conservation, you know, that we've always had as Americans, but recent events have really catapulted that into the forefront. So there's more discussions about that happening at the thought process rather than by the time the manufacturing process actually takes place. And that's where to capture it is in the development process, to make sure that you build that cyclicity into every product that we make, because we can make things that are entirely recyclable. We don't need to make, you know, the majority of things that we have the ability to make can have cyclic economies, but we have to commit to it.
Okay, thanks.
I echo Tom. I mean, thank you for these thoughts. My question when I read it was, you know, this committee went on sort of happily for years looking at a healthy surplus. Could we have been asking better questions about long-term financing? And I mean, it's like Morgan's doing a great job. This is great. Program supports itself, but we maybe we're not asking the right kinds of questions or sort of thinking about the long term.
Well, I think the biggest issues with why this budget went the way it did over the past several decades is, if you look at the 2010 per capita, the changes between the 2010 per capita that we assessed to the 26 member municipalities, you compare that to the 2020 per capita. In 2010, for solid waste and recycling services, residents were paying $18.65 a year for all the household trash they could throw at no cost, all the mandated recycling for free, and a few fee item recycling in between. In 2020, that went up $1.94 to $12. So, you know, less than $2 over 10 years. That's not a sustainable model. And the
Right.
reason that it was done that way, monies were being diverted from transfer station tipping fees that were coming in from the commercial sources and revenues from the sales of recyclables, which we've always done really well at. Dunn County has always been a source separated county where we can create our own recycling commodity and sell direct to end recyclers. We make good money on those. When the recycling market crash, which we're still in, happened, we had no more revenues for that. With changes to our tipping fee structure and the effects of COVID-19 and reduced cost of diesel fuels, commercial drivers could drive right around us and go direct to landfill at a lower cost than what they would pay if they were tipping in Dunn County. So we lost those revenues. So those subsidies, which I like to call them, that we had from tipping fee revenue and sale of recycling that was historically diverted into artificially keeping the per capita low, were no longer there. And so the harsh reality then is you've had this increasing momentum towards the end of this 30-year program where radical changes were needed to increase the revenues coming into the division to support what infrastructure it had left. And of course, with 30-year infrastructure that's in an entropic state, costs a lot of money to keep that going. So in 2021, if we were to have stayed in business in the discussions that we had, and I've narrated that in the report, the per capita, in order to get us where we needed to be to at least continue providing services and operations like we do now, would have jumped to $60.05, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, to put that in perspective, I pay $65 a quarter.
I pay
for recycling and
$71
trash.
a quarter.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's many of the municipalities that have chosen to go with privatized services are paying that or more. You know, it's not a cheap endeavor in any solid waste recycling. And I think that's, you know, that's how the program was created to utilize that type of model, but over time, it just was not going to be sustainable. And that's what put us down.
It would have been sustainable if we had recognized that we needed to maintain investment and raised rates accordingly and done the outreach to explain what was happening. Do you think that?
I think
That's the mistake we made, isn't it?
That's a great point. And, you know, even myself, I mean, it took me 3 years just to figure out,
Yeah.
searching for the magic in this per capita form, because remember, I
I
had no
remember.
time with George. He was already gone. By the time I got here, there was an interim director who was here for 3 months and then they were leaving. So I had no direct interaction where I could understand how this per capita model worked. And after 3 years, I just figured out, well, the per capita was just subsidized by robbing Peter to pay
Right.
Paul. And so when there's nothing left to rob, you have to put forth a very realistic cost to your programs. And
So-
the sad part for this, for me, and I think for a lot of residents, is the feedback that we got is residents were willing to pay. They loved these programs. They loved having access to all of these sites and services that we provided. And they understood that this was a grossly undervalued program, and they were willing to pay it. The problem is that many of the village and town boards really didn't have that outreach, those town hall meetings with their residents to figure out where their support lied. Because the feedback that we've gotten as a division was overwhelmingly, we would have supported this to the very end. Turn up the costs. We know it's undervalued. We'll pay.
We waited too long to start the outreach process and well, anyway, thanks for the report, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want
Dave.
to add that Morgan, a couple years ago or 3, started coming to the solid waste recycling board with his recommendations of raising the prices up to the, you know, per capita fee. But the board felt that they didn't feel they could raise it or didn't want to for one reason or another. I don't think, I think Morgan was letting us know that we needed to raise it, but the majority did not want to. And a comment on the other side, that the reason that people know and are willing to pay is because they still are, just like you mentioned. In my township, it's $100 a month. If you want privatized solid waste. So, or $100 a year, excuse me, $25 for that. But that would have been in line with what the county had, and the county had better services for getting rid of recycling. I had my first call yesterday on how to get rid of a chair. Now we did put it in the newsletter at the first of the year, when we decided to go with Tiffany in New Haven with Waterman. But I couldn't believe it that I hadn't gotten more calls on what do I do with this. And I think that the chairs and the couches have gone out in the ravines like they did years and years ago. And this person wanted to get rid of it the right way and was asking, what do I do with it? Well, now you have to take it 30 some miles to Hammond. Okay. But they want, and still pay.
Right.
Just like we would have had to with Dunn County's. So I think we took a huge step backwards environmentally as far as I'm concerned. But I thank Morgan before, and I thank him again, and wish him all the best.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
And the fact that, Dave, you're mentioning that people really want it, and I think that has a lot to do with you. Just getting so darn infectious because you get excited about it, and I think that passed on through county residents. So you have a lasting legacy.
There's a lot of people in Dunn County that want to recycle everything, and that's come from our program.
Yeah.
We were recycling a lot more than anybody else. They've learned that. Those questions I have had. What do I do with my number 5s? All sorts of stuff
Plastic
that
film.
isn't mandated. Yeah. That doesn't go in.
It's hard to throw that stuff in the trash.
It is
It's-
once
Yeah.
you've been recycling it. We have lots of containers in our garage for all sorts of different stuff, and now we throw one a couple of containers, but there's a lot of stuff that we used to recycle that we don't anymore. That it goes into the trash, and that's too bad because it's filling up our landfills. It's a lot better when we recycle it.
Any other questions or comments on the report?
I'd just like to say, if I may, that again, that I so appreciate the work of our staff, and a lot of work goes into this, a lot of work that you do all the time, and it was extremely well done, and I appreciate it. I think we all do. Thank you.
Okay.
I just have a little note on mine at the end of the report. It says, wow.
Yeah, I echo that. Thank you, Morgan.
We expect better next year too.
You always put it in perspective, Tom.
We'll cut their
That's so good.
budget and we'll ask for more. How about that?
How about that? I have a motion on that. Okay, well, let's do the final item then. I think we're done with the report. And we're down to number 9, the fee schedule. Chase.
Sure. As you're all aware, this next county board meeting will be the second reading for our updated manure management ordinance, has a longer title, Agricultural Performance Standards and Manure Storage Management Ordinance. In preparation, with my assumption that that will be approved, we do within that ordinance in chapter, section 10.13, the fee structure. Through the updated ordinance, we've established a fee structure for the first time. Our previous ordinance, there was no fee associated with manure storage facilities for permits. This will establish one, and it'll be a standalone fee schedule, which is why it's before you today. One that will not require an ordinance update or amendment in order to adjust the fees. With that on the schedule, or that's in your packet, I'm proposing the manure storage facility permit application of $500. The manure storage facility closure permit application, so this will be an abandonment of existing storages that need to be closed, keeping that at 0, so no fee associated. Proposing an after the fact permit application fee of $2,000, and then an appeal filing fee of $100. Our ordinance does, if the proposed ordinance does create an appeal process. So if there's a decision that we make that is not viewed as the applicant or a citizen would like to appeal our decision, then there is a process for that where that would come before the Land Conservation Committee for decision and discussion, and there is a fee associated with some of that time. I'd like to just elaborate a little bit on the specific dollar amounts. The $500 is consistent with looking at the amount of time that we as a staff may put in initially for permit application review and approval based on a fully burdened rate of our staff that work on that. And then the after the fact permit application fee of 4 times the permit application, so the $2,000. That's set up to, for one, to deter people from not getting a permit. It is trying to incentivize them to come forward when a permit is needed. This likely would only be exercised in events where, maybe we've had a conversation of informing an individual that they would need a permit, and then they chose to continue on without getting a permit. This would be maybe where that would apply. It would also, with those after the fact permit applications, and that process is much more workload intense, and hopefully to help recoup some of those costs. So again, all these fees are non-refundable. That's in the proposed draft ordinance. And this would be, I guess, go into effect upon on condition that the ordinance itself is approved and adopted. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and this would likely is an actionable item. Didn't see upon the ordinance.
Any questions of Chase?
Yes, on the closure, isn't there staff work involved in closure? I looked at the 0 fee and said, wait a minute, maybe that's not. Well, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's not enough. So.
There is certainly there's staff work involved. There's in some cases we actually do the design work for closures. In many cases we do, but we'd also have a cost share program that's available for that. We don't recoup any of our time on that. That would be consistent with all of our other cost share programs. The service that we provide for the technical and the financial, we don't receive any money out of that cost share dollar amount. So part of the reason for the no fee for closures would be to remove any hesitation by a landowner to close a structure. We have enough hurdles as it is to get some of these structures closed. Many people want to retain them for sale, even though by law they're supposed to be abandoned. And this is consistent with other counties, is they don't have fees for the closure. So that's where we kind of try to stay consistent, but also to eliminate any potential hurdle for someone that wanted to close, or we were telling them that they had to close the structure. I can see.
I totally agree, Chase. I think it's important that we keep that at 0 so that everybody does get the application. Keep it at 0.
You're smarter than I am.
Don't know about that.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the schedule?
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor
I'll
Moore,
second it. I'll second it.
Seconds. Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
If I may, just a reminder, this will not be effective until it's contingent upon the adoption of the ordinance. So there's still currently no fee for storage if something was to come in today.
And Mr. Chair, just one quick question of you and Mr. Bartlett. Is it okay if at our next board meeting, if when we approve this storage ordinance that we stand up and cheer? I am so happy to see this going to the second. Because it was
Been a while.
on the agenda before I got on the board.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Should we put that on the agenda?
Cheerleading.
Be an action
Oh,
item.
gee. So it is so nice to see it.
Yeah, and I actually think it is also true that it was, in a way, it was worth the time because the final product is better than what we started with. So, good. Are there any announcements?
I have one, Tom.
Yeah.
I just let the committee know we received our new work truck last week.
All
Been
right.
waiting a long time, not only to budget for it, got that approved
It's
in
been
the
a long
budget,
time.
but then I placed the order mid-January, and with the delays with the semiconductors and everything else, I was surprised when I came back after the 4th of July holiday, there was a voicemail saying your truck is here. So actually picked that up on Thursday, had a topper put on it Friday, and it's in service right now. We've been using it. So just want to thank the committee for budgeting for that vehicle. It was a long time waiting for that. So
What kind is?
so it's a 2021 Dodge Ram Tradesman. It's red. It's out in the field today, but if you're ever back to the building someday, we park it on the west side of this building near the neighbors. It's red. It's got a red topper. So smells new. It had 8 miles on it when I picked it up, and now it's got over 100. So the old truck will be going to auction sometime soon, very soon. The last time I used it was Thursday last week, and when I pulled it back in the parking spot, it had 99,995 miles on it. We're 5 miles short of 100,000. So really, when you think of it, the vehicle for its age should have more miles than that. I mean, it was an 06, so it's 15 years old. We don't put that many miles on it, but the age was catching up to it. It's starting to rust, and on warm days, you can't run the air conditioner because it overheats. The tires are getting really bad. So it was, we were just hoping the truck would arrive before we had to put new tires on and have a major repair. So in my July staff report, I'll maybe throw a few pictures of it in there. But I just wanted to at least make that announcement. So
Okay.
What dealer did it come
we ended up going through Gilbert's of Sand Creek, and I know a question was brought up before.
from?
Yeah, we kept the
Thank you.
business local. And we got multiple estimates, Ford, Chevy, and Dodge, of course, and Dodge was the low price leader, so we went with them. So far, we're happy, but we've only had it about a week, so time will tell. But it is a major improvement. It's a full-size pickup, and that's really what we needed. We're moving from a, mid-size, I guess, or very compact type pickup truck into a full-size. So a lot more storage, and we just feel it's going to better serve our needs. Hope to have it for quite a while. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? So our next meeting is July 27th. And with that, I guess we are adjourned.